I'm Dava Behrens with Coldwell Banker Valley Brokers in Corvallis, Oregon. I've been helping people buy and sell real estate in the Mid-Willamette Valley for over 20 years. Here's some information you might find useful. Hi, so I think that there's 7 things that every homeowner who's thinking about selling their property needs to know about a purchase agreement and what's in it that could affect the way they do their transaction. So I made up this list and I'm going to refer to it because it's kind of long, but I think it would be very helpful for every seller to be aware of these items. Number 1, fixtures. What are fixtures? Fixtures are things that are attached to the house that convey with the title. They're permanently attached. So like your toilets and your sinks and your light switches and your landscaping, those are all considered fixtures. They're attached to the house. If you have a favorite fixture that you want to move with you, oftentimes it's a light fixture or a mirror or something along those lines, then you're going to want to address that specifically in writing, and frankly, I would recommend removing it before you ever went on the market. That way it doesn't become something that a buyer falls in love with and wants and could affect your ability to negotiate through your transaction. If it's not a fixture, it's personal property. Personal property is things like firewood or a bench or furniture. If there is some fixtures or personal property that you want to keep and convey with the house, you need to write that down too. And the buyer needs to accept that. You can't just leave things and expect the buyer to take them over if you don't want them. So that all has to happen in writing in your transaction. And you want to think about it in advance so you're not under the gun or in a heavy negotiation when you're working through this part of it. Seller representations. Sellers make representations. There's a standard list. Has to do with type of water that you have serving the property, type of sewer, if there's hazardous materials, any governmental surveys or changes. Conditions of systems and equipment. And this is over and beyond the seller's property disclosure. Further, if there's a change in any of these representations during the transaction, you are obligated and must notify the buyer of that. So that's a really important thing to be thinking about while you're in a transaction. Then the other thing is what are the tax ramifications of this transaction? Top of mind would be, are there going to be income taxes? Well, it's going to depend a lot on your special circumstances, including the price of the property and what the use of the property is and what your situation is. And then over and above that, there is also some withholding requirements. The federal government has FIRPTA, which is the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act, and we need to be aware of status of persons in the United States and what the tax ramifications associated with that are. And then beyond that, the state of Oregon, if you're a non-resident, not residing in Oregon, then there could be withholding requirements for that too. So you want to make sure that you're consulting with a tax professional early on in the process and make sure that you're not in a situation that's uncomfortable when it comes down to closing. Other things, earnest money. What is earnest money? Earnest money is the upfront deposit that the buyer puts into the transaction. It's credited to them at closing as part of their down payment and closing costs. And it's really considered the provision for liquidated damages in the event the buyer does not perform. So very few sellers actually receive the earnest money when a transaction fails, because the buyer often has a contingency or a condition that is in place that allows them to exit gracefully and retain their earnest money. Earnest money is not a set amount, it's a negotiated amount. We do have some typical amounts in our market, but the seller needs to be aware that that's not really spending money, and also consider what conditions are associated with their transaction in reference to that earnest money. Costs. What are the costs of selling their house? Generally, the brokerage fee, the owner's title policy in Oregon, and half the escrow fee are the hard costs that sellers would pay. Sometimes buyers ask sellers to pay some of their closing costs. And then there are prorates for taxes and homeowners association dues, and of course, any outstanding liens or loans against the property need to be paid in full, typically. And then closing and possession. When are you going to close? How does possession work? Closing is defined in our documents as the date that the deed records and the funds are available to the seller. Typically, possession is at 5 p.m. on the day of closing. Arrangements can be made for earlier possession or possession after closing. There's some ramifications to doing that, so that's something that you want to talk to your broker about before you get into that situation. Actually, you want to discuss it probably before you start negotiating a transaction. So those are things that I think are 7 important factors in your real estate transaction that you need to know about before you sell your home.